everyone. Thank you, Linda, for the introduction. So I want to just give like a little bit of background before we get into this, because this is kind of the whole story from before I even came out, realizing, and then all of the good, the bad, and the ugly afterwards. Um, there are just I want to toss out some general content warnings for transphobia, mental harm or mental health, mentions of self-harm and suicide as it relates to just populations at large and not specific people. I do also want to say October is LGBT History Month. Um, and a lot of LGBT history is trans history. And a lot of LGBT history was done by trans people. So um, would highly recommend if you have the time and mental capacity. There are so many wonderful and amazing books and podcasts and movies even about all of LGBT history. So highly recommend. One other thing, because I have done this for almost the entire time I've been trans, which has been about 6 years, 6.5 years, I am an open book. So when we get to that question section, feel free to ask me anything. And I will say, I will probably tell you if a question is not something that you should ask other trans people. But I am putting this out there that I am comfortable answering any question. Genuinely. This has been something I've done forever. It's something I'm passionate about. I want people to know things that they may not have known before. So from the beginning, I did not know I was trans as a young child. I was always a pretty goofy kid. Everyone figured out that I was probably some flavor of queer. Because even as a kid, I went back and forth between being a tomboy and being covered in rainbows and glitter. Um, I did theater and dance, and I was also interested in RC cars and building things with my dad. And I was an only child, so I got all of those experiences because my parents both wanted a boy who played baseball, never did, not a sportsy kid, and they wanted a daughter who, you know, got to do prom and play in dresses and stuff. And so I was always a very musical and a very theatrical kid. And there were a lot of different sides of me, even at that very young age. Um, it wasn't until middle school that I realized I was probably some flavor of queer. And it wasn't even until high school that I even thought I might be trans. There weren't a lot of trans people in my life when I was a kid because it was the 2000s and then it was the 2010s. And it wasn't until the late 2010s that we started seeing a lot of trans people in media. And so I always just thought I was probably gay, question mark. Um, and then I actually realized I was trans at Appalachian State between freshman and sophomore year of high school at Canon Music Camp. Um, there's this it was really funny. I had been having kind of a rough freshman year of high school, and I was a French horn player at the time, and I wanted to come to Canon Music Camp so bad. I raised money. I sold little trinkets and crafts that I made, and then my parents helped me pay for the rest. And I came to Canon, and for the first time in my life, I met actual trans people. Several of them, not just one or two, but like a whole group of them. And then I sat down and did some thinking, and I had some realizations about myself that maybe certain things just didn't line up. Like for the past year, I hadn't been responding to my own name, not consciously, but it went in one ear, out the other. It didn't click. Um, and I had always hated bra shopping and clothes shopping. And I just dreaded all of these things so deeply that I realized, oh, this is maybe not normal. This is maybe not right. Um, so I came back from Canon Music Camp and then promptly came out to my parents they were shocked because I was shocked. They didn't have anything leading up to it because I didn't really I had never expressed even the thought that I might be trans because I didn't know that that was the right terminology for what I was experiencing. I just thought I was depressed. I thought I had just been depressed. That's what I had been diagnosed with at the time. But it it wasn't depression, it was gender dysphoria. Um, so my parents were like, you have to transfer schools. You will not be safe at your old high school, which was true. They were right. I was very upset about that, but looking back, they were incredibly correct about that. So I transferred schools to a tiny, tiny high school on the campus of UNC Charlotte. And I was the only trans person at that school. And I was one of maybe 3 LGBT people because my graduating class had less than 50 people in it. So tiny, tiny school. Like genuinely, it was like on the very edge of the UNC Charlotte campus. So a bunch of our classes were college classes, and I did get to meet other LGBT people, but not for a couple years. And my first week of classes at this brand new school, I went to go use the women's restroom because that's what I'd been doing for all of my life, and no one told me otherwise. And I didn't know who to talk to, what questions to ask, like what the protocol even was for being trans and going to school, because I came out 2 weeks before the school year started, and I didn't know anything. So I went and used the women's restroom. And I had been introducing myself as Ari, which is a name that I picked just kind of randomly, and said that I used he, him pronouns. And so so teachers heard that and students heard that, and I was pretty, like, for the most part, they were decently respectful of that. But a teacher saw me in the women's restroom, but knew that I had been using he, him pronouns. And she went back to her speech and debate class of all of my classmates but me, because I'd missed another class I had to take. Um, and she had asked them to debate whether I was a boy or a girl. Not a general question of like, what's up with Ari? Just a debate. And I didn't find out about that until 2 days later, when one of my friends who was in that class told me. And so, again, I had been out as trans for less than a month at this point. And I was just, it was this crazy mix of emotions. It was like heartbreak, and it was fear, and it was like oh crap, what do I do about this? Because again, no one had told me, like, what do you do in this situation? Um, I was very lucky to be introduced to an organization called Time Out Youth based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they are a youth center and advocacy group. They are all of these wonderful things for LGBT youth in Charlotte and the surrounding areas. And I began taking the light rail and the city bus multiple times a week because I couldn't drive. I was a high school sophomore. And I spent a lot of time there. Um, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever been in a space that was for LGBT people, for and by and of. And it was a lot. Being new to that community can sometimes be very daunting. There's a lot to learn. I, as a trans person, made mistakes and did not know everything. And that was accepted and fine. And I learned, and I was taught by youth. I was taught by adults. Um, and my parents at this point, they were supportive. They were worried about my safety because at that point, there were laws like HB2, which were to prevent the use of bathrooms other than the sex on your birth certificate. And there were like attacks, and we were hearing a lot about just genuinely the safety and stuff of trans people. So, but I found this organization, Time Out Youth, and I learned a lot from them, and they gave me opportunities that I had never had before. They taught me how to talk about my experiences. They actually paid me money to be on what they called a speakers bureau, where they would take us out to schools and retirement homes and professional conferences and talk about our queer experiences for people to learn and for people to be able to ask questions and to either grow as a person or grow in their career. I spoke to a Jewish middle school, again, a retirement home, and a conference for professionals in like medicine and education. So it was definitely a varied group of experiences. And then I spoke to the school board in Charlotte because they had a regulation, not necessarily a policy, but something that could still theoretically be enforced, that said for club inductions for things like National Honor Society and like the Thespian Society and stuff like that, you couldn't wear anything, get this, with racial or ethnic connotations or that fell outside of your sex role. This was the wording, like actually the genuine wording written in this document. It hadn't been updated since 1978, and I went and talked to the school board about it. And guess what? They didn't know it existed. So um, they they changed that, and that, I think, when I saw that and when I heard that, kind of like a switch flipped in my brain saying, this is something you can do. This is something I have the power to do. And then I've been a menace ever since. Um, not really, not really. A little bit. And so because of all this experience that I'd had and the experiences I'd had at Canon Music Camp, I went back the summer after I came out as trans and had another wonderful and awesome experience because the staff there is wonderful and awesome. I decided I wanted to come to App State because it had been the only school I'd ever seen that was as deeply supportive of their students, not just in an LGBT way, but just in general. I'd been at UNC Charlotte and I hadn't necessarily had the best experiences, mostly because I was a high schooler. Like in retrospect, it wasn't because UNCC sucked, it was because I was a high schooler and that was a very new program and they didn't know how to handle having high schoolers. But I came to App and I studied music because that's the thing I've always done and the thing I've always loved. And then I started being a menace at App State. Um, Again, not really, just a little bit here and there. Student government, which I cannot start on that because it will take me another hour to talk about everything that's happened in student government. And the LGBT Center, which has since been renamed thanks to North Carolina DEI legislation. And being an RA, or as an assistant for housing. And now I run a program for women and trans audio engineers called the Femgineers. And I'm the studio manager at the recording studio. So it's been a lot. And the thing I think I've learned the most, especially at App, has been you can't necessarily take no for an answer the first time. When it comes to changing policies, when it comes to making events happen, when it comes to supporting the people in your life. Because there were a lot of times where I went into someone's office, generally someone within App State administration, and I said, this thing has to happen. And they said, no, we can't do that. And I said, okay, but look at it this way. Can you make it happen this way? And they said, maybe. And they said, what if you also had this, this, and this? And they said, okay, fine. And sometimes there has to be some level of pushing and giving more resources and giving more time and giving more energy to make the things that are important happen. I'm going to see if I missed anything else that I wrote down in my notes before I continue on. Oh, I forgot the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is community. Another one of the biggest things I learned is that community is the most important thing. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the LGBT community or the trans community. It means community. Because a lot of the spaces I've been in since leaving Time Out Youth and leaving my high school have not been trans communities or LGBT communities. It's been whoever's there and whoever's willing to sit at the table with you and willing to have a conversation with you and learn and it's not being right isn't the most important thing. It's trying, it's being genuine. It's always a thing that I say is that it's never about the reason I think, like trans people especially, if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal because everyone makes mistakes. I made mistakes as a trans person. I have misgendered some of my classmates and friends. I see my girlfriend there laughing all the time. It's a slip up. It's a thing that happens. But refusing to learn and refusing to grow is generally people see it as a lack of respect because you wouldn't go up to your friend Mary and call them Sue, even if you knew their name was Mary. Because it's not a respectful thing to do, because that's not who that person is. But the biggest thing has been community, because that's how you learn, that's how you grow, is to be in the room with one another and have genuine conversations and be willing to learn and grow and change. The biggest community for me at App has been my acappella group, which is such an interesting hodgepodge of there's a lot of queer people in that group. And then there's also people who have not ever really interacted with queer people all that much before. And because we talk and we have these honest and thoughtful conversations, it is such a vibrant energy in that room. And twice a week, every week, we go in and we sing and we dance and we talk and we get to just be together in that room forever and ever. And then we all leave eventually because we graduate and everyone gets really sad. And then we still keep in touch. The people who graduated when I was freshman still come back to concerts and still talk to us all the time, emails and phone calls and texts, and because there's such a love for each other. So love and respect for everyone in your life that you are able to extend that to realistically is so important. And I think the trans people in our lives just want the same. Even if it looks a little different than extending that same love and respect to someone who isn't trans. Like, in our minds, for the most part, just being willing to try and willing to be honest and thoughtful about it is the most important thing. Yeah, I think that's all the big stuff I wanted to cover. And I am happy to answer questions or talk about anything else if you guys have any either questions about my life experience, questions about trans people at large, that kind of thing. Don't be shy. Thank you. Oh, Linda's going to be the mic person.
I'm going to go ahead and be the mic person for running the mic to people, unless you want to come up here if you have a question for Nathan. I'd like to just take a moment. I did this last week and it really helped me. I'd like to take a moment before we dive in to the questions and discussions. And I'd like to just take a moment and take a breath and have a moment of silence where we think about what we've heard and a little bit of appreciation for what's been said. And then you can think about what you want to hear more of from Nathan. So are there any of you who have questions for Nathan? We're going to start here in the room and then we'll move to the folks on Zoom. But first we'll go here in the room. Are there folks here that would like to ask something? I see Bill trying to wait and see whether he should. You can. Do you want to come up or?
Thanks, Nathan. It's so great to have you here. I'm crying a little bit. I spent 8 years in the dean's office at Hayes School of Music, and one of the things I cared the most about is how individual students' paths could be navigated, and it's really encouraging. It's really encouraging for me to know that I know the dean there. I know so many faculty colleagues there and continue to struggle. It's not a linear path. I'm sure you've had some challenges, but the fact that you're there and that you identified Canon Music Camp and the Hayes School of Music as places where you could probably grow and be who you are. So that's fantastic for me. The question I have for you is about the community that you've joined as a recording engineer, which from my perspective continues to be a pretty, it's kind of a nerdy bro culture, right? It's almost, it's way, way over 90% men in the field still at large. And men, probably binary identifying men, let's just say. And so for you as a trans person to enter that culture and become a leader in that culture, let alone a member of that culture, but really a leader in that culture. I'm curious your a little maybe story of that trajectory.
I'm actually shockingly excited to be asking this question because I did just get back from the Audio Engineering Society conference in New York. Like, who? Hi. It was a lot of, yeah. It's gotten better definitely even since the years I've been there. But yeah, for context, 98% of popular songs are produced and recorded by men. It's a lot. So like I said, when I came into App State and joined the School of Music and the recording program, we also have one professor who's a man. We love him. Professor Wynn is incredible and amazing, and all of the professors I've had in the School of Music are absolute gems. So I my first year at App, I didn't join the Femgineers, the organization I briefly mentioned earlier, because I thought it was just for women. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable necessarily being in this space because that's not my space if it's just for women. And then I had a talk with some of the people in Femgineers, and they were like, no, it's kind of it's for gender minorities, which is, if you haven't heard that word before, it generally just refers to women and trans people and anyone um, with a gender expression that is out of the norm, if that makes sense. So I did end up joining, and then I ended up co-president of that organization by default, by being one of only 2 people to show up to elections. um, and so that organization very, very luckily has grown to be about 20 people, which has been, and not just recording engineers, but also some of the folks in music marketing and some marketing majors who are interested in music marketing. So that's been wonderful. Going to those conferences, though, can sometimes be very daunting. My very first time at the Audio Engineering Society conference in New York City, I have this rainbow hat that I wear that Jimmy, actually at Canon Music Camp, the head counselor, made me when I was the summer I realized I was trans, and I wear it all the time. My girlfriend's laughing because it's true. It's basically my hair. So um, I went to this conference, and someone there referred to me as that rainbow lady, and continued to refer to me as that the whole evening, and then never actually bothered to ask me for my name, despite asking several of my male classmates for their names. So that was a little not great. But this year, 2 years later, I went to the Audio Engineering Society conference again, and there were 5 or 6 panels on DEI that I had the pleasure and joy of going to, and I was one of maybe 15 people in each of those rooms. So I accidentally am now on the DEI committee for the Audio Engineering Society because I showed up to things and got really excited about them. There's also a lot of really wonderful organizations that are working so much with not only like professionals, but colleges and universities to give people an awesome chance at becoming recording engineers. One organization, We Are Moving the Needle, works really closely with Femgineers, and they just donated 50 USB microphones to our recording program for students who lost recording equipment in the hurricane, and for those who need the opportunity to have that piece of equipment. So, but no strings attached other than they would love us if we made some social media content because that's helpful. But no, they're just giving those to us, and it's been so wonderful to see the School of Music and the recording program and the Femgineers work closely with all of these wonderful organizations, and a lot of our professors are very thoughtful about making sure that we have diverse voices coming in and speaking to students, talking about their careers, showing that representation, because it can be a little draining, and it can be a little, scary sometimes. So it's gotten a lot better, I will say, even over the past 3 years.